Hi there. We've got a fun new product we're rolling out. I'm going to do a quick walkthrough of how it works. So for this video, I'm assuming that you know how audience reporting works. You know how to create a report, you know how to create an audience. And we're going to start with actually creating a report. So once you've created a report, and I've got one here, I've got both relative and absolute reports selected. I've got my time frame set up. I've got some custom metrics. I've got a single audience for this example. I'm allowed to then add a filter. And what the filter is, there's four options. The first one to conceptually understand is the top percentage of earners. So I can choose top N percent or X percent of earners based off of how much revenue they've earned during a time frame. So I can say X percent of users, I'm going to say 25%. So I can include only the 25% earners. I can choose a time frame that's different from the report, so a single day or multiple days. In the other bottom earners is just the antithesis of that, the low earners, if I wanted to focus on those folks. And then the second standard deviation, first standard deviation allows me to kind of cull outliers in my report, which basically means I want to pull in 68% of the users as it relates to the mean, earners as it relates to the mean for the first standard deviation, or probably more appropriately, the second standard deviation. I only want 95% of the users that are tightest, closest to the mean. That way, if I'm doing a predictive LTV, I'm not going to rely on one huge whale that spent $100 in the app, and I can be a little bit more confident in my predictions. I'm not relying on catching those whales. So I've got second standard deviation for culling outliers, and then I've got top and bottom percentage to kind of focus in on the outliers. Let's go to a report. I did a report already, which has the top 10% of users, and we'll walk through that to kind of see how that works in the wild. So we've got DAU here of users, around 10,000 a day, and if I flip to the top 10%, falls to about 2,000, which makes sense because you've got about 2,000 users in a given day, so about 50% of them are coming back as a daily active user. So the thing that gets super interesting is when you look at revenue. So let's look at cumulative revenue as it relates to sales revenue, and we're looking at just the top 10% here. And you can see $233 right next to my face over here is made by the top 10%. But if I flip off the 10%, you're looking at, let's get my face farther out of the way, $268. So vast majority, 90+% of the revenue earned comes from the top 10%. But if we look at ad revenue for all users is 29,000. Look at the top 10%, and we've got 16,000. So 50% of the ad revenue comes from 10% of the users, and 90% of the sales revenue comes from the top 10% of the users. And this is interesting for ad-supported businesses, especially when they say, I only focus on IEP. In this case, a significant portion of ad revenue might actually come from those IEP revenue users as well. All right, so let's go down to the next most interesting aspect of this filter, and that's the retention curve. So the retention curve with the top 10% is obviously going to look very different from the standard retention curve because the top 10% of users are more engaged and more loyal. And if we look at LTV, we can see that the LTV of these users, $5.73, but if you look at the entire audience, 71 cents. So there's a massive difference in these users and how they act and what they're worth. So now it's probably next question is, okay, what makes these users different? So we've got a metric. We look at per user. This customer has daily puzzles completed as a metric, and roughly the average is around 14. But if I flip on the top 10%, you can see the average is about double that, to about 30 puzzles completed per day. But if I switch this from a standard report to a relative report, that is a report that allows me to see what the users are doing from the day of install, I can see the top 10% of users are playing 36 games, whereas the standard user is only playing 12. So now they're playing 3 times more games on day one. So if I wanted to figure out these users early, okay, what makes up a more likely top 10% user, I'd flip on that 10%. I'd say, okay, anyone who plays 30 games is highly likely to be in that top 10%. And then I can focus on targeting them. I can focus on catering them. I can focus on giving them bonus packs or retention or whatever strategy you have for retaining and engaging that user. So I hope this was helpful. Any questions, let us know.